Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. I want to give you ladies a little quiz. If you have a piece of paper, as I'm doing the presentation, I think I did this last time too. See how much you remember. How many famous Henrys can you name that are on postage stamps? And here I'll get you started with Lou Gehrig. And I didn't know this till about 2 months ago, that his official first name is Henry. He didn't go by that, but he was Henry Lou Gehrig. And this other gentleman here is on a Swiss stamp, and it's Henry Durant, who was the founder of the International Red Cross. And he's on about 20 different stamps, so very popular Henry. All right. Also, I gave you this opportunity last time, and I think some people took up on it. And that is, we have this monthly calendar that I do, and I connect each day with a historic event. And I've yet to not find a stamp that relates to some historic event of each day of the week. And if you'd like to get a copy every month emailed to you, just send it off to the museum's email there, info@spellman.org. And a little news, maybe you probably already heard this, but postage is going up again. It's now 55 cents, and it's going up to 58 cents. But you can still use all your old forever stamps, and you don't have to add any 2 or 3 cent stamps as you used to do, let's say about 15, 20 years ago. And I put this stamp on here because this will be the first stamp sold under the new 58-cent price. So, but any forever stamps you have, you don't just use them as you normally would before the rates went up. A little bit about the museum. It was founded over at Regis College by Cardinal Spellman. There he is with his stamp collection. Founded in 1961 and opened in 1963. It opened on his birthday. It was a big celebration. About 1,000 people, I'm told, were there. Even the Postmaster General came. So it was the first stamp museum in the country, and the Cardinal's collection was given. The reason it's at Regis College, I think, is because the Sisters of St. Joseph, or the teaching order, he had given the stamps to them. They actually owned the stamps. And so that's why the campus has the museum. If he had given it to a different order of nuns, it might have been at their institution. But he did learn about stamp collecting when he was in Rome with a lot of seminary students. Remember, he was born down in Whitman, Massachusetts, went to Fordham University, and then went over to Rome, then came back to Boston, worked as a priest in Newton. If you know the Catholic newspaper, The Pilot, he worked on that. And then eventually he became very influential, friends with FDR, President Roosevelt, and he was then sent down to New York to become the Archbishop. Very important man, as you can see from the fact that he got on Live in Time right after World War II, shows that he certainly made his name helping out all the troops. He traveled all around during World War II and talked to all the Catholic chaplains. Now, speaking of historic days, today is the anniversary of the approval of the 19th Amendment. It says August 18th. I meant to say, yes, today's the 18th, yeah. And there's an interesting story, maybe you know this. 3/4 of the states have to ratify to make a constitutional amendment. And so they were up to 34 states, and Tennessee was going to be the 35th state to do it, and they had to vote in the state legislature. Well, they were 1 vote short. And so a young man, I think he was only about 24, 25 years old, got a phone call from his mother. And his mother told him, you better vote for that amendment. And so he voted for the amendment, and Tennessee's approved it, and that's how women's suffrage finally came to be on 101 years ago today. So, and there's a number of stamps, and a lot of countries have stamps about women's suffrage. Okay, the first postage stamp was 1840. People invented by a man named Mr. Hill. There's a postage stamp of him. You can see his dates down below. Turns out before 1840, all over the world, if you mailed a letter, 9 times out of 10, the person getting the letter had to pay. And that was not a very good system. They were losing money. People weren't home to get their mail. People didn't come to get it at the post office. People didn't want to pay. People didn't know they were getting letters, so they never bothered looking for one. So Mr. Hill said, I have a better idea. we'll make the sender pay, and the way we'll prove it is that we'll give them a little piece of paper with a little glue on the back. They'll stick it on the envelope, and then we know we can deliver it for them. That's Queen Victoria. She was queen in 1840. She'd only been queen a couple of years, but that image of her stayed on the stamps for a number of years. But that's the birth of postage stamps. These are our first two stamps. It took us 7 years to get stamps after England did. Congress was a little slow in passing legislation. But that's Ben Franklin, our first postmaster, and of course, George Washington. Now I'll get into some stamps. I'm just going to kind of have a general overview of all the several different topics. Of course, nurses, doctors, medical research, everybody during the pandemic has certainly been praised for all their work. And these are just one. That brown stamp on the left is just a famous, I don't know what famous painting it is, but it's called The Doctor. And that came out 100 years after the American Medical Association was that. And if you know a nurse, next time you see a nurse, ask her that when she or he graduated from nursing school, they lit a candle. That seems to be a tradition at nursing schools. And that's why the candle is on this stamp. And I didn't know that till about a month ago. So I had no idea why the candle on the stamp, but that's to show that they're lighting the way for healthy people. And stamps on medicine, medicine on stamps, excuse me, is a very popular, and there's a whole organization called Medical Philately, and they have a newsletter. It's called Scalpel and Tongs. And I think, you know, tongs are what people, stamp collectors use to touch the stamps without damaging them. You know what a scalpel is. And that just gives an indication of how popular this subject is among philatelists, and I think you're familiar with that word. A philatelist is just a fancy word for stamp collecting. A little piece of presidential trivia, and it happens to be a Henry on a stamp, and that's William Henry Harrison, who wanted to be a doctor in 1791. His family was very poor. I think he was going to go into Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and he couldn't complete his studies, so he went into the Army, and then he got into politics. So unfortunately, he wouldn't. I'm not sure how good a doctor he would have been. I think you know the story about him. He gave his inauguration speech without a coat or a hat, got sick, kind of pneumonia or something, and died about 3 months after he gave his inauguration. So he was the first president to die in office. But again, he didn't get much advice from his doctor, I guess. The first an African American to appear on a stamp is Dr. Charles Drew. He did a lot of research in blood transfusions, and he was very important during World War II in blood plasma and storing it. And then he, after the war, he went to Howard University and taught. But unfortunately, he the Red Cross appointed him to their blood bank a few months before World War II broke out, and he was in charge of using this for the Army. But they had a policy in the Army that they would not give African-American blood to white soldiers. And Drew, even though his work had brought about how to separate plasma and stuff, so he quit the job. He couldn't work under those conditions. The armed forces then, I'm sorry, they wouldn't even accept blood from African Americans at first. That's what got Drew upset. And then after he resigned, they did allow that, but they had to be stored separately from white. So, but he went on to teach and got himself on a stamp. John Hopkins, I always thought the place was called John Hopkins, but there's an S on the end, and that's because that's the family name, Hopkins. And so he started a dry good business with the brother. They eventually made a lot of money. He invested in the railroads, which was a good thing. It's like investing in the internet today. And he turned his earnings into a sizable fortune. He wasn't a doctor or medical man himself, but he opened up an institute for studying medicine, and it's one of the most well-known ones in the world. And he had $7 million that he bequeathed there, and he helped found a number of other institutions related to medical research. And then Canada issued this stamp of a man named William Osler, who knew about the Hopkins, and he worked at the John Hopkins Hospital and created a special residential training program for physicians. And he took them out of the lecture hall down to the bedside. So he's honored by this Canadian stamp. And then Dr. William Stewart Halstott was also connected with John Hopkins, and he emphasized the antiseptic technique during surgical procedures. And this is still hard to believe that how operations were done without any concern for keeping things clean. And but this doctor, Transkei, by the way, is the country from this stamp. Anybody know where Transkei is? Raise your hand. It's in Africa. It's a small little surrounded landlocked country down in South Africa. But he's honored. I don't think he's from there, but a lot of countries will issue stamps even with people who are not from that country. Now, COVID, obviously, we all know about COVID, and a number of countries around the world very early after the outbreak started issuing COVID stamps. There's one over there from Iran, Helvetia, the red stamp you're looking at, that's from Switzerland. And it doesn't say Switzerland on it because they speak 4 different languages in Switzerland, as you probably know. The 4 different languages are up there, solidarity. So they use the old Roman term for the Switzerland area, Helvetia. And that one down below is a postage stamp from Austria, and it's made, believe it or not, out of toilet paper. So they got a little humor in issuing in their stamps. And a couple of other, you can see the COVID symbol. The stamp on the left from Portugal is kind of interesting. This is a man checking for any possible infections on the mailing. And a nice stamp from Spain, thanking all the doctors. And so topics, current events become subjects on stamps. And speaking of COVID, we do have to give a thanks to all our postal workers. I'm sure if you were home, you've met your letter carrier, but they went through the whole pandemic delivering mail and packages. April is World Health Day, and this year's theme was Together for a Fairer, Healthier World. Can you excuse me? No, I'll get it later. That's all right. So every country puts out different stamps. I'll just let the phone stop ringing. I'm expecting a delivery at the museum tomorrow, so I think that's it. So anyway, so stamps often are issued to celebrate different commemorations, and this for the World Health Day. Hospitals are a popular subject on stamps. This stamp over on the left, issued by the United States a number of years ago, celebrating our public hospitals. And then other countries have saluted there, especially this, excuse me, this hospital in India is quite well known in that country. It's called Safdangjeong, and it's a multi-special hospital associated with in New Delhi and all the other medical hospitals. That's an interesting stamp, by the way, from India. That circle in the middle, that represents the spinning wheel for Mahatma Gandhi. Remember, he spun his own cloth, so the British couldn't sell their cloth in India, and they put that, and every flag from India has to be made of that material to make it an official flag. So that's their salute to Gandhi. And then other big and small countries have issued hospital stamps for their various anniversaries. And to test your little geography knowledge, Tristan da Cunha and the Falkland Islands, you may have heard of the Falkland, but not too many people know about Tristan. And those are 2 island countries off the coast of South America near Argentina. Notice, by the way, little stamp information. See that little silhouette in the corner of all the stamps? That's a silhouette of Queen Elizabeth. And the British are the British and the British colonies, because both of these are British colonies. They do not, Great Britain doesn't have to put its name on its stamp. All they do is put the silhouette of the Queen. The reason for that is they were the first country to issue stamps, so they've given the privilege of not having to say Great Britain. And then a couple of others, Tokelau is out in the Pacific Ocean. And then a nice set of stamps for this Royal College of Surgeons at Dublin, another very famous teaching institute related to medicine and surgery. And again, as it says here, it's a world leading international university for health sciences and training for surgery. Stamps can raise money for medical issues. They're called semi-postal stamps. A lot of countries do it, and you will see usually a cross or a red on the stamp. And some of you may have bought some of these. They're sold for the price of a letter plus a few cents extra and that money goes to charities. The stamp in the middle, it's been around for quite a while now, and it's raised over $100 million for breast cancer research. So and you can still buy these stamps. So if you want to give a little money to a charity, buy these stamps, and 3 or 4 cents per stamp will go to the charity. And this one from New Zealand is rather old, one of the first stamps that was used to raise money for charity. And it was raised specifically for tuberculosis research. And there is a proposal, as you know, a number of stamps come out every year. How do they decide what goes on a stamp? And you can send a letter to the post office, a special committee that will take recommendations. If you can get a lot of signatures from people endorsing the idea, you have a better chance of getting the stamp. But I found this one. This is from a proposal for a stamp to raise money for childhood cancer, which is obviously a serious issue. When the stamp will come out, if it ever does, it's hard to say. But at least people do make sample suggestions for what the stamp should look like. And then one of the first stamps to raise money was in Stockholm by the king, King Gustav. He founded a clinic to deal with cancer in 1911. And then it was suggested to him that he use stamps to raise money for the clinic. And so this set of stamps came out in 1928, one of the first stamps to, again, raise money. And Cancer Awareness Day is February 4th, and this is, again, celebrated all around the world. And this is a stamp from India, kind of an abstract, a little bit of a picture. And then I like this stamp using the symbol of cancer, the crab, and this is a country that doesn't exist anymore, Yugoslavia. But again, and I think that the words on the side mean fight against cancer, borba provi raka. So you can learn a little Serbian language there. And then we've had our breast cancer stamps. And we had the breast cancer awareness stamp. This was not a stamp sold to raise money, but it was for awareness. And this other stamp a little earlier, back in the 60s, 5-cent stamp. So again, and prostate awareness got its own stamp, another important part of annual checkups. So using stamps as sending messages to people to remind them to take care of themselves. And National Nurses Week. Nurses have been honored all over the world. I like the stamp, particularly in the middle. I think you can figure out where that's from. But it says Nippon, which is what the Japanese put on their stamps. Nippon. And that I have a Japanese friend, and I sent him a picture of that stamp, and he said that's a very old nurse's uniform from, I think, probably the turn of the century, or maybe even earlier. But that was issued to praise nurses for all their work. Another interest, the Canadian stamp on the left. Notice there are 2 languages on that stamp. Canada is a bilingual country, so most of their stamps, if they have any writing on them, will do it both in English and French. Florence Nightingale, we all know about her, and her slogan, "Live life when you have it. Life is a splendid gift. There's nothing small about it." And that's in German on the stamp there. I keep pointing to the stamp. You can't see me pointing, but I'm pointing to the stamp. So and she obviously helped get nursing and spread the importance. And this is an interesting younger Florence Nightingale on a German stamp. And then this Costa Rican stamp has Florence Nightingale and another woman named Edith Cavell. who is a, um, I'll get back, I'll talk about her in a minute. The Red Cross has been honored by stamps as well as the Nobel Prize. They won the Nobel Prize in 1917 during World War I for all their humane activities. And then in 1963, again, with the International Red Cross, the Crescent Society, they were given the Peace Prize again. And the Red Crescent Society is the Muslim. We have the Christian, the Red Cross, and the Muslims is the Red Crescent, but they all do the same thing. But these are two, Monaco is not a Muslim country, but Turkey is. And then worldwide, they celebrate Red Cross Day. We've, again, stamps with that. As you can see, very big celebrations honoring them all over the world. Here's back to Edith Cavell. She was on that stamp with Florence Nightingale. She was a British nurse who went into World War I down in Belgium, and without discriminating between the French and English and the Germans, she helped some 200 soldiers during the war. She, however, was arrested by the Germans, and because she was behind lines and helping out the American, well, at that time it was English soldiers, she was executed by the Germans. So she did not get a stamp. There's a mountain, however, named after her. So you can see the mountain, the green $1 stamp. That's the Edith Cavell mountain in Canada. The one stamp on the right is what we call a poster stamp. It's a, or you might call it a Cinderella stamp. The Cinderella stamps are things that look like stamps, but are kind of the stepsisters, and people collect those as well. In fact, we had an exhibit at the museum, and one poor little girl came to the museum wanting to see all the Cinderella stamps. And we had to tell her, sorry, that's Cinderella's not on them. We just call them that. Sophie Mannheim, I just was picking up various nurses who we probably don't know too much about, if anything, but she was the Florence Nightingale of Finland. And she got divorced, trained as a nurse, and then became president of the Finnish Society, and eventually in charge of the whole International Council. So again, a woman being honored for her work in the medicine. This woman is interesting, from the United States, Mary Breckinridge. She went out in Kentucky, and she pioneered midwifery in the very rural areas of Kentucky and southern Indiana, northern Tennessee. And she started up a comprehensive health system for primary nursing and midwifery. And interestingly, her grandfather was the vice president to James Buchanan. So, but she gets honored as a founder of the nursing service. And then she actually, after the war, she went to France to help with hygiene and getting nursing associations set up, and the French recognized her. Again, this is not a postage stamp, but another one of those Cinderella stamps. Phoebe Pember, a Civil War nurse that we don't hear as much about, but she was down in South Carolina and set up a huge hospital taking care of over 75,000 patients under her care in the war. And I think that stamp down on the bottom, I believe, is another mountain that she got named for her. Dorothea Dix, a more common name. She worked with the mentally ill to make conditions a lot better for them, and lobbied state legislature and created the first generation of American mental asylums. And she served as a superintendent of the Army nurses. They actually, just yesterday in Maine, we were at a farm that took over an old building. It was called the Institute for the Feeble-Minded, which was a term that was used. But Dorothea Dix saw the horrors of how people who are mentally ill were treated. And then Elizabeth Blackwell gets credit for being the first woman to receive a medical degree in the United States. She received it in 1849, and first woman to receive it. And then after that, she opened up a medical college back in England. At that time, around the 1840s and 50s, many people had to go to Europe because Europe was way ahead of us as far as medical techniques and everything. And she did some of her studying over there. And the insulin, discovery of insulin in 1922. So this is the anniversary coming up. And again, stamps, I'm really amazed. I don't know how many of you watched Downton Abbey on Masterpiece Theater. And they mention the year is 1922, and Lord Grantham mentions insulin just being invented. They were trying to help somebody with that. So these stamps honor the invention or discovery, I guess, of insulin. Banting, he was from Canada, and he worked with these two other people, and first successful treatment of diabetes. And they received the Nobel Prize in medicine for their achievement. And again, here's that country, Transkai, recognizing these two gentlemen. And then these are some other countries that have celebrated the anniversary of the discovery of insulin and various other things. Very picturesque stamps. And then we have Dr. Fleming. Everybody pretty much knows this name regarding penicillin. He discovered it in London. And then this led to the high use of antibiotics and greatly decreasing death from infections. And here he's again, he wasn't from the Congo, but he was honored by them on their stamp. And these are some other worldwide stamps recognizing him. And let me just check here. Okay. And these are I just found these two stamps. One of them, the one on the right, is a US stamp, and it's celebrating the antibiotics, the penicillin, and the other one, a kind of interesting view. And then polio. I was actually, when I was in 4th grade, I was a polio pioneer. I wasn't given the vaccine, I was given a placebo, and then later on got the vaccine. But these stamps honor Dr. Salk and the eradication, at least in this country, and now pretty much around the world, along with the Sabine, the other gentleman there, Dr. Sabine, who invented the oral vaccine for polio. Terrible disease. That museum I mentioned to you in Tewksbury actually has an iron lung on exhibit. And if you remember those horrible things where you had to sit in this lung so you could breathe. But Salk was from Pittsburgh, and he was greatly honored. In fact, when he met President Eisenhower, Eisenhower actually cried because of meeting the man who had pretty much helped get rid of polio. And it's a little strange today with so many people refusing vaccines that almost everybody got the polio vaccine. Didn't seem to be any question about that. They eradicated it, and then before his death, he did some other work trying to fight AIDS, and then he died out in California in 1905. And you can see that stamp for the polio, getting rid of those crutches that people had to use, including our President Roosevelt. Then we have Person Julian, another African-American who synthesized various things. And this gave large scale for chemical synthesis to create different types of steroids and medicines for people. And he's honored on this stamp. And then the Mayo brothers, we all know about the Mayo Clinic up in Rochester, started in the 1880s. Today it has over 4,500 physicians and scientists, as well as places in other parts of the country, and spending millions of dollars each year on research with over 3,000 research. So it gets mentioned on a stamp. That envelope is what we call a first day cover. A lot of stamp collectors like to get a stamp canceled on the day it was issued at the place. This one happened to make sense, was interested in Rochester, Minnesota, where the clinic is. And those are the two gentlemen there, the two brothers. And again, we get a lot of first day covers donated to the museum. And when kids come, we like to give them one or two as a souvenir. Other famous doctors, let's go way back in history. Hippocrates, the Hippocratic Oath. He's honored on another Transkai stamp. And the Hippocratic Oath, which he stated about the oath of ethics for physicians. And the main issue, as you know, do no harm. And so he's featured on two Greek stamps here being honored. And then the symbol, there's two actual symbols that are used by medicines and hospitals. One is the caduceus, which was carried by Mercury, which you can see on this stamp. That's Mercury on a French stamp. You can see the wings on his hat there, and you can see him flying away. He carried that. He was trying to stop a fight between two snakes by throwing his rod at them. That's the snakes, I guess, twirled around the rod, and the symbol for medicine was born. But the more popular one is the Alscipias, which the World Health Organization, and that's one snake entwined around that. He was the god of medicine and doctors, and so his symbol is used a little more with the one snake. But again, used on a lot of stamps that are recognizing different parts of medicine.
Yes.
First doctor on postage stamp goes back to this gentleman down in Ecuador. He was a scientist, but he also was a big freedom fighter. And so he combined both. But as far as research goes, this is the first time a doctor had appeared on a stamp, way back in 1899. And then a Dutch doctor was what they considered the second doctor to be honored. He was a botanist as well as a chemist and a humanist. And he considered modern academic hospitals started in Holland. So he gets recognized. And then this gentleman, again, name you may not be familiar with, Ignaz Semmelweis. His big thing was wash your hands. Just like we said when the pandemic started, he came up with some research with childbirth. And he noticed that when children were born in homes with midwives, they survived much better because the midwives were washing their hands. And so he introduced the cause of this childbed fever, which happened in the hospital, they said. And so he insisted on all the antiseptics in delivering of children, and the death rate in hospitals of children very well declined. And Dr. Crawford, one of our American doctors, he was the first one to use anesthetic. He was removing a tumor from the neck of a patient, gave them this sulfuric ether. Some people called it funny gas or laughing gas, but he gets credit. And of course, the Massachusetts General Hospital has a room where anesthetic was used as a demonstration a couple of years later. And of course, we know Dr. Schweitzer, who went to the African jungles for 52 years to introduce public health measures to the natives down there who were getting all sorts of ailments because of the tropical diseases. And he earned himself a Nobel Peace Prize in 1952. And there he is on the stamp with the Peace Prize. And he's been honored by a number of countries, a very famous name, Dr. Schweitzer. And he was a very intelligent man. He was what they call a polymath. He had a lot of different skills. And he grew up in North Carolina and played the organ. And so interestingly, on this stamp from the African country of Rwanda has Dr. Schweitzer, not with medicine, but with a keyboard. And the same with the stamp. Magyar, by the way, is the Hungarian name that they use on their stamp. So the designers of these stamps went a slightly different way than medicine. Dr. Finley down in Cuba. Cuba was having the yellow fever, and so they worked on it. Clara Moss was a nurse who volunteered to be tested on a vaccine. She unfortunately died the second time it was tried, but she was willing to give up her life to try that. And Dr. Finley in Cuba, where the disease was most common, got himself recognized on the anniversary of his death. And then over in Clara Moss, as I just mentioned, she gets recognized in Cuba as well as the United States during the Spanish-American War, going there to get sanitary and get rid of yellow fever. And then yellow fever went over to Panama when they built the Panama Canal. Lots of construction people dying from that. And so Dr. Gorgas used some of the work from Cuba to try to reduce the yellow fever deaths. And this is an anniversary of a hospital named in his honor. And then smallpox, which has pretty much been eradicated, although there's some talk that it might be coming back, has been recognized. The official day, December 1979, no more smallpox in the world. But again, I've heard some stories that it's possible it might be coming back. But everybody took the vaccine. And this is an interesting piece of postal history. This was used to put holes in letters when they arrived from foreign countries in case they might be infected with yellow fever. So they'd punch these holes in the letter in hope that the germs would escape and then they could deliver the letter. This is on exhibit down at the Smithsonian Institute. And then Dr. Jenner, who worked with the smallpox vaccine, developing the first vaccine for that, recognized both in France. And again, you can see the British stamp. You can see that silhouette of Queen Elizabeth on that British stamp celebrating Dr. Jenner working. And then another disease for leprosy, which is officially called Hansen's disease. And of course, lepers were excluded from communities. But Dr. Hansen went over to Hawaii. He was from Belgium. And he went over to take care of the lepers in Hawaii, even though leprosy did not have to make them outcasts. And he stayed with them. And April 15th is a holiday in Hawaii honoring his death. It's a death of a holiday. Here he's on a Belgian stamp. Belgium's another country that's bilingual, so notice Belgium is in both Flemish and French. World Leprosy Day takes place in January. And that was the anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's death. Even though he did not have leprosy, he treated them. And then malaria, another disease carried by mosquitoes. Recognize there you can see the medical symbol on that 4-cent US stamp. And so malaria still not eradicated, but we did have a man visit the museum who all he collects is mosquitoes on stamps, and he has quite a few of them. And the many deaths of malaria carried by and it's still a very dangerous, killing over 500,000 people a year. Measles, another disease that's pretty much been wiped out, but still around the world it affects, and so vaccines for that. This is celebrating Mr. Jenner for that. And different campaigns to get people to take their medicine, to remind people to do that. This is one from Brazil. And then typhoid fever, another terrible disease from bad drinking water that's been polluted and with feces in it. And this Pierre Bretonneau was the pioneer in finding out what was causing typhoid fever and named it diphtheria. And so he worked and performed different new other operations as well. So these are all doctors' names that I've never heard of before, but they're all well known in the medical field. And the tuberculosis, we used to have, we still do, Christmas seals. They were started in Denmark to raise money. They were somewhat like those charity stamps. And a woman named Emily Bissell was a nurse working in Delaware in a sanatorium. She wanted to raise money, so she had heard about what was going on in Denmark, and she started the Christmas seal, and that is of course the cross for the tuberculosis society. And she sold them in post offices for a penny a piece. Teddy Roosevelt endorsed the idea, and I think even today you might get them in the mail as a raising money. And he discovered the cause of tuberculosis, Dr. Koch, and he's recognized on these stamps. And then Mr. Waxman was also a way of dealing with tuberculosis, streptomycin. So all these famous doctors tying together. And then, of course, the APGAR test. If you had a child, you remember they give a score on the different vital signs, and this was developed by the Virginia APGAR, just as a way of checking that the birth was good. Heart rate, muscle tone, other signs. There's 10 different ones, and she was the first woman to become a full professor at Columbia University. So again, honored. And she was a stamp collector, by the way. And then, interestingly, in her later years, I found this. She was a violin player, and then she started flying lessons, and she wanted to fly under the George Washington Bridge, which I don't think ever happened, but she was quite a lady. And then, of course, heart disease. Many countries urging you to take care of your heart, using the EKG symbols as designs on the stamps. And then this was issued, again, another American stamp, just reminding people to take care of themselves. And the EKG test that you take. And then Dr. Paul Dudley White was the founder of preventive cardiology. And he was the physician for President Eisenhower when Eisenhower had his heart attack. And Dr. White founded the American Heart Association, became its president. And so he's a well-known name because I believe he was born in Roxbury. Then there was the first heart transplant by Dr. Christian Bernard down in South Africa. Very important operation. And heart transplants now are still dangerous, but many people are getting heart transplants. The first heart transplant was Dr. Bernard down in 1967. The one person did not live that long, but again, it opened the way for saving people whose heart had just given out. And then donating blood, another big message from the post offices to think about giving blood. That's the US stamp over there, and then many other countries, the blood drive. And now, last thing, there are rare diseases that drug companies don't work as hard to find cures. So there's an effort to encourage small diseases affecting less than 200,000 people, but they need to have curing too. So this was a stamp from where is this from? I think this is Madagascar, urging people companies to research. And then, of course, dentistry is another popular topic on stamps. And Pierre Fauchard is known as the father of dentistry, way back in the late 1600s, 1700s, man with a fancy hair. And he believed that you should clean your mouth every morning, wash it out, rub your teeth with a wet sponge, and put a little ethanol mixture in it as a cleaning solution, and kind of encourage people to use toothbrushes instead of a sponge or a cloth. So the name, again, something to remember, Pierre Fauchard, kind of the father of dentistry from France, and urging people to brush every day. And here's another Hungarian stamp. Other names I didn't get into, but are all honored on stamps: Louis Pasteur, Madame Curie and her husband, Joseph Lister with antiseptics, Dr. Walker was a very important nurse during the Civil War, and we have mentioned Dr. White. So, and these are some of the recognitions for those people on stamps. So again, just a real overview of a lot of famous names. Some I'm sure you remember. I don't know how many you're going to remember that you didn't know. I still can't remember most of them, but so that's our medicine on stamps. Any questions?
Hold on, I'm trying to unmute people.
Okay.
Can everybody unmute themselves, please?
There.
I'm not, let's see.
No, yeah. I have a question.
Sure.
I didn't understand the Cinderella stamps. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
understand calling them Cinderellas, and then I also don't understand their purpose.
Well, a couple of purposes. Some of them are just artists who like to draw stamps. They just like to make something that looks like a postage stamp. Two, they are used for publicity and honoring people that the post office hasn't issued a stamp. The Cinderella comes from, Cinderella was a stepsister, remember, in the fairy tales? And so
Yeah.
Stamp collectors figured these stamps, these images aren't really stamps, they're kind of like stepsister stamps. So that's, I don't know who invented the term Cinderella, but that's the issue. It's just a term that collectors use and some people really have large collections of them. Sometimes they're called poster stamps as well.
But do they cost money? How are they sold?
Yes. Artists may sell them. The cause, I found one from Lexington, celebrating the Battle of Lexington, Lexington Green. So they're sold to people who don't collect stamps or do, but also like these other ones. So yeah, they do cost money, but there's never usually a value on them. They're usually sold more as souvenir type things. Good question.
Are there any stamps about cleft palate?
Ah. Well, what I usually do with a question like that is I go back and research. And the easiest way to do that, as you know, is to type in cleft palate on
Yeah.
Google. What I do is cleft palate on postage stamps, and then I
Yeah.
look for images. Uh,
Okay, I can do that.
Try that. I'd like to try it too, because I tell people I can come up with something on a stamp. Maybe there's an operation or that some doctor worked on in some country, because that is a common malady when children are born. Oh, who asked that question?
Joyce.
Joyce?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You try that and I'll try it. And if there
Okay.
is, I'll put it in the next PowerPoint.
Okay.
Henry, I have a question.
Yep.
I'm struck by the fact that all the stamps are rectangular. I have a couple of stamps that are actually triangular and they fit in the corner of an envelope. What's the tradition of having just rectangular stamps?
That's a good question. I should probably find some triangular stamps to put in, because there are. We don't do it very often in the United States. I think we've only had 5 or 6 triangular stamps.
Right.
Other countries, smaller countries, have issued them as, so people will buy them as something different.
Cool. Yeah.
And there are round international stamps too.
Yeah.
That's
There
true,
are.
yeah.
The Christmas
At
one,
Christmas
right.
time, they do, that's a good point.
Yeah, yeah.
But as far as any rule, size is a factor. What you can get on the stamp depends on the design. Post office, again, something that'll fit in the corner. You don't want a huge
Right.
stamp or you realize that some countries, the smaller ones, issue stamps not necessarily for mailing letters, but for stamp collectors. And those
Okay.
stamps usually aren't worth as much because they could be used on a letter, but from a country that only has 400 people and that prints millions of stamps, most of those are bought by stamp collectors and never used. But yeah, the Jamestown founding is a triangular stamp. And there was yes, that's a good question.
Yeah, I have a nice blue one and a red one that I got maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that was celebrating a stamp show, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
But don't we have square stamps in the
We
US?
do, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the stamps that they sell in booklets, just the American flag, it's not celebrating any particular event. Those tend to be square because they're easy to package in a booklet and stuff. So,
Right. Henry, I have a question.
Yep.
When I was a young teenager, I started a stamp collection. And it was more to learn about geography, where they came from, and then I put them in series and all that. And
Sure.
that little collection has traveled with me around the world. And it's sitting in a drawer, and I don't know if it has any value. What can I do with it?
Well, if you can get to our museum, we'd be happy to look at it and tell you what you have. And you can either just tell you a little more about it, maybe bring back some memories when you were collecting. Chances are it's not very valuable
Uh-huh.
because you were just a child collecting normal stamps that were made in the millions. If you don't want to keep it anymore, we do take donations. We're happy because we use those with the kids programs that we have. And sometimes, a stamp may only be worth $10, $15 to a collector, but that's the one stamp he or she is missing in their
In the
country
series.
collection. So
Yeah.
it might show up. We do charge $50 to look at the collection unless it's rather small, but if you can get down to it sometimes, we'd be happy to look at it. Just
Okay. Who collects stamps these days?
mostly
What?
Men over 65.
Is that right?
It's
Oh,
an
my
old,
goodness.
if you go to a stamp show, and I got a little weight on my belt, but if you go to a stamp show, you'll see some rather heavy gentlemen sitting there going through boxes of stamps.
Interesting.
But we do have people come to the museum who have retired now and collected when they were much younger, didn't have time to do it, and they're getting back into it. And then
Mhm.
foreign countries, India and China, are becoming very popular collecting.
Hmm.
It was actually almost outlawed in China by Mao Zedong because he thought it was too middle class. But we have sold stamps to people in India because they're getting some income. And so, and some people, there's still millions of stamp collectors, and some of them do it, not for the joy of collecting, but for finances, buying a stamp, hoping that it'll increase in value in a few years.
Hmm.
But as less and less people collect, the demand gets lower too. So it's a tricky
Right.
business collecting valuable stamps.
Mhm.
Mm.
Well, I'll take a look at my little collection because it was started in Europe. So it's many different countries.
Yeah, and
But,
sometimes those are more interesting because we don't see that as much in this country. Most people
Right,
collected
right.
US stamps.
Yeah.
So,
I just
yeah.
cannot throw them out. That's my thing. It's like,
oh, well,
sort
you
of
could,
interesting.
you have a bunch of books or is it just a small collection or?
it's a pretty small collection. It's probably one book and a whole bunch of loose ones.
Well, if you wanted to spend a few dollars and mail it to me at the museum, I could look at it and then let you know. You didn't
Okay.
have to come down, but if the postage didn't cost too much, we'd be happy to do that. And then see if there's anything somebody might be interested in. So, yeah.
Right.
It's a
Okay.
fun hobby. Some people complain for little kids, for, fifth and sixth graders, they're issuing too many stamps and it's costing too
Mhm.
much money now. And when I was a kid, you could get a stamp for 3 cents. And then you could get what they call the block of four, for 12 cents. And they only made maybe 15 stamps a year. So,
Mhm.
but now if you go into the post office, you'll see at least 15 new stamps that have come out in the last few months. So,
Right.
and the fact that that they're self-adhesive makes it harder to get off the envelope. So,
Right.
Right. Now, some of the stamps, or at least most of the stamps that I have the postal stamp on top. So they're validated by the post office.
right. And sometimes, believe it or not, those stamps are more valuable than one that hasn't been canceled.
Right, right. Well, I'll take a look at it.
Not usually, but sometimes it meant the stamp was actually used to mail a letter, and then maybe there's a return address on it that's interesting. Maybe there's a little sticker on it for airmail that people collect. Stamp collectors don't just collect stamps. They look at everything on an envelope and look for it. And so there may be some envelopes that would be worth more than the stamp.
And the stamp itself. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Okay, Joyce. Oh, let me give the Henrys on stamps. See how many you
Yeah.
know.
Well, how about
Henry-
Henry Wadsworth Longfellow?
Yep.
Oh,
he's,
Henry Fonda.
Oh, here they are.
oops,
There's
I have
a
one
whole
fellow.
bunch of them.
I don't have them on this. Yeah, Longfellow actually had 2 stamps, and he was the first American poet to be on a stamp back in I think 1940. But these are, and there are more Henrys. When I do a program, I sometimes get a new one. The biggest one lately was Henry Gehrig, Lou Gehrig, because I didn't know that was his first name.
Mhm.
And Marshal Pétain down at the bottom there, he was very important in World War I for the French. So he was a hero, but by World War II, he sided with the Nazis and there was no more stamps for him. So, but some of these names you're
Who is-
familiar with.
Who was Henry Tanner?
Henry Tanner was a African-American artist in the 1880s who was an impressionist. Went to France. A lot of artists went to France during the impressionist period and then came back and did
Oh,
American
I'll look him up. Yeah.
impressionism. So he does some beautiful work. And again, not a well-known name.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think you know Henry Mancini for the Pink Panther.
Mhm.
That and the TV show you may remember from the 60s, Peter Gunn. He wrote that. Henry Luce, Time Magazine, Life Magazine.
Yeah.
And Henry James, I think is the latest Henry to get on a stamp. So, yeah, so, and I didn't put it in this show, but Henry David Thoreau actually has 2 stamps as well. So anyway, and they're always issued on some kind of anniversary, 100th anniversary of their birth or publication. So. Well, thank you for joining me this afternoon. I hope the heat
Well, thank
wave
you
breaks.
very much. Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. It was very interesting.
Interesting.
Appreciate
And maybe
it.
when we do get back to live presentations and I can come up again and tweak this a little bit or tweak the other one if we get a bigger group to join us. So, all
Great.
right.
Good.
And Joyce,
you.
not Joyce, Susan, is it Coolidge?
Yes, it is Susan.
I'm gonna
yeah.
send you some corgi stamps, okay?
Oh,
Pictures
oh,
of them.
neat.
You can see
oh,
Wow.
thank you so much.
how the dogs, I looked it up quickly and there are several corgi stamps you can look at, so.
Oh.
All right, ladies, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Okay,
Have a
thank
good
you very
rest-
much, Henry.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Good rest
Have
of
a
the
nice
summer.
evening.
Bye.
Bye, everybody else.